Thank you for being here today. I'm really looking forward to this interview, and we're just going to start by you telling us what your name is, where you're from, and who you are.
Well, my name is Annette, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. And who I am is a whole bunch of things. Definitely, I'm I'm an electrician. I've been one for 46 years, and I just retired a couple of years ago and moved down to here in Las Vegas. I've been a lesbian for eons. It came out when I was 15. And I've got a very deep, faith-filled spiritual practice, and I consider myself a Christian. I definitely believe in the teachings of Jesus.
So you said you came out at 15 years old. I'm familiar that time period. It wasn't exactly, you know, cherished to be a lesbian at that time. So what was that like? When did you come out, and what was it like in the 70s?
It was brutal coming out at 17 or at 15 in the 70s. I had met for the first, I always thought that something was wrong with me because I noticed that I looked at girls, and so I used to feel kind of shame around that. And then when I was 15, I met my first lesbian couple, and was like, oh wow, maybe I'm not so crazy. And then by the time I got into high school, my sophomore year, I met actually physically a lesbian that was the same age as me. And so we kind of had a small group. There was like 4 of us or so, and boy, it was rough. Kids can be kind of mean, and they used to pick on us and say stuff about us, and it was awful. And we did a lot of hanging out together, especially on the weekends. It was kind of like almost the first time where I felt like I found my pack of people. So I started, there was a friend of mine who was also came out. We all went to high school together, and her mom was moving to Nia Bay, and she didn't want to go there. She wanted to finish high school here in Seattle. So I told her that she could stay with me, and I was living with my grandparents, and my mom was living there as well. So I had been out all weekend partying with my girlfriend at the time, and I had a little hickey on my neck, because that's what you do when you're young, apparently. And my mom wasn't home, or was home, and the person that was staying with me wasn't home, and she said, I think I think I'll call her Sam. I think Sam is a lesbian. And I go, huh? I go, why do you say that? And she said, because my mom said, because I caught her in bed with another woman down in your bed, downstairs. And I go, huh, wow, okay. And it didn't shock me because I already knew all that. And she goes, I kicked her out, told her to pack her things and get out, so she's not staying here anymore. And I go, you kicked her out? And my mom says, yes. And I go, well, Mom, if you kicked her out, then I'm going to leave too because I'm a lesbian. And I just gathered minimal stuff, and my mom's kind of yelling at me, saying whatever she was saying. And I said, okay, see ya. And so I left. And I called my girlfriend at that time and told her that I just left home. We knew a couple of older lesbians who worked and had a job, and they had extra bedrooms, and they said, I talked to them, and they said, okay, you can come and stay with us, but the only deal is that you have to stay in school and graduate high school, which, thinking back on that, that was very smart of them to say that. And I said, okay, I'll go to school. And they go, you don't have to pay us any money. We'll, supply the food and all that. And I said, okay, that would be good. Well, at some point while I was staying there before I graduated high school, I was seeing this counselor, and my mom kind of went there because I was telling the counselor that I was a lesbian. And in the 70s, it was against the law to sleep with the same sex. It was an actual law, and I couldn't get into so much trouble because I was a minor, but yet my girlfriend, she could have gone to jail because she was 21. And it was rough. It was taboo looked upon all aspects. So I had told this counselor that I was a lesbian. Well, my mom shows up at the end of that counseling session, and she starts badgering me. And I go, Mom, just leave me alone. You know, I'm trying to work through my stuff here. And she started chasing me down the street. And then because I started running, I go, just leave me alone, leave me alone. I'm not coming back. I'm a lesbian. I'm not coming back home. And so I just kept running and running. And I found myself trying to, my mom couldn't run that fast, but I found myself running into doorways and just kind of hiding, you know. And it was awful, you know. She said I was sick at that time. She didn't agree with what was happening, just saying all kinds of nasty things that other people in this predicament probably have heard as well. But it's very hard on the heart when your mom's saying that you're sick, and it was a bad situation. I didn't go home. I probably spent the first year away from my family, at least a year, because I remember when I turned 18, my mom asked me to go to my grandparents who had raised me for my birthday, on my 18th birthday. And I didn't show up on that day because, of course, I wanted to party, right? Because that's what you do. I partied, and then I did end up showing up, and I said, well, I don't know. And she goes, no. She goes, I'm not going to bring anything up. I just want to see you. And she said she loved me. And so she showered me with gifts, which was very weird for my mom to do because she didn't really pay attention and buy me school clothes when I was a kid. So she was almost like, felt like she was trying to buy my affection. So eventually I started coming around a little bit more to see my mom and my grandparents. She said she didn't tell them that I was a lesbian, but I don't know. My mom lied a lot, so I don't know if I believe that. But I also think that to deal with everything, what the world was saying and how we were, we definitely partied hardy a lot. Drank a lot of beer, before we found acid and pot, of course. And we'd go to parties on the weekends where they'd be like in a big, huge house, and everybody there was queer, and we took acid all weekend long. Didn't really come down. I met my first partner there. The only thing was that by that time all that started happening, I was 17, she was 21, so we got somebody to buy us some beer now. So that was kind of nice in the big scheme of things, I should say. And so she was definitely an alcoholic, and I didn't get any of that. I was just trying to belong, and belonging is hard, and some things I didn't want to do. We couldn't go to the bars or anything, so my friend who drove, she would drive us up to Capitol Hill, which was way different back then in the 70s than it is today. And we would be parked in her Mustang outside the bar. One of the things that I tried first at that time, that a couple of lesbians had come up to the car and they said, well, here, you want to try some of this? And it was a little bottle, and it's called butyl nitrate. And I'm very naive. I didn't know anything. I took off the cap, and they go ahead and try it. And you know, I would have drank it. And I looked at my friend, and I said, you do it first. Well, praise God that she did do it first, because I handed it to her, and she knew that she was just supposed to sniff it, not drink it. So I was like, oh, okay. So then I did it afterwards, and oh my gosh, what a rush it was. And it felt very weird and foreign to me at the time, but through, you know, getting older and passing it around in bars, when you get old enough to go to the bars, it was just something that we did. Is it good for you? No. If you do too much of it, boy, do you have a headache the next day. Whew. Snorting the liquid is not good for the brain, which might explain a lot. There was a period of time, it started when I was 17, that there was this club down in Occidental and Pioneer Square off the beaten path called Association, where you could go dance. And it was for underage. And so I used to go down there, even though my girlfriend, like I said at the time, was 21, we used to go down there and dance. Well, something had happened and they closed down, and so then a gay establishment opened up in Belltown on 2nd Avenue, and some people that are older will probably remember Saturday Night Fever with the lighted dance floor, and that was supposed to be the draw. They had a lighted dance floor, and we were like, oh yeah, because I can get in there. And so they didn't get the people that they wanted, so they ended up closing down. And then all of a sudden, I was still under 21. There was this place called the Monastery, and it was an old church, and you had to sign up to be there. And at that time, when they first opened their doors, the people that took your name, how old you were, you know, all that stuff, and you had to sign up on a list so that they would let you in. I think there was like a $5 cover or something. They all dressed in monk garb with a rope tied around their waist. And so you could go there if you were underage, but if you were over 21 or older, you could bring in your own alcohol. Well, shit, I had that made because my girlfriend was 21. So she would bring in cases, we'd load her up and she'd bring in cases of beer, and then we'd all go, we'd get to go inside. Well, in high school, I had started selling acid. Blotter acid was huge, and we'd take it all the time. And sometimes we would, not sometimes, I'm not going to lie here. Every weekend we did acid. It was the thing to do. I didn't drink that much. I drank, but not that much because I was always so high on acid. And we did that every weekend, all weekend. And it was laughs, and the monastery was just a big ass party thing, but it was like, wow, we're different, but we all belong to the same. It's not a club, but I'll call it a club. It's like we were a family. You're meeting people that your same age that is also either a gay man or a lesbian, and that's how we got to know people, because there wasn't any place for us to go. As I said earlier that I was an electrician, I got my first electrical job in 1978 when I was 19, and I'm still with my first girlfriend at that age. And she didn't work, I just worked. And I got my first income tax check back, and she was a pothead. So I get my first income tax check back, and I don't remember how much it was, but it was like, wow, we're rolling in the dough. And I ended up buying, she goes, well, let's sell pot. Let's just buy a whole bunch of pot and sell it. And I was like, oh, well, that's a good idea. You know, I'm still working every day, and she's smoking the pot, plus, you know, selling it. And did we make any money? I don't know. I just let her deal with whatever she needed to deal with, you know, as far as selling, smoking, and buying it and doing all that stuff. Then, while we were still together, so we were together from when I was 17 to when I was 21. Well, what happened when I was 21, there was a real shift, because I'm like, wow, I'm legal to go into the bars now. And I always had kind of a baby face, so they wouldn't let me in the bars because I didn't have ID. Well, shit, now I'm 21. So I was like in the bars all the time, drinking and partying. And I had come home one day and from a night out, and she waited till the next morning, and she said, you know, she goes, I think we should break up. And I go, oh, really? And she goes, yeah. She goes, don't you think that we're in this relationship because it's easier than not being in it? And I said, well, that's a good point. And so, and she goes, you know, you're still really young. You want to go out and party? She goes, I've lived that scene and I'm kind of done with it. So I said, okay. And then, so I kept going out, whether it was to a men's bar or a women's bar. And I met these two women who were lovers, and they introduced me to cocaine. And they were selling it. Well, I guess must have been likable or something, but so I had my own little posse, and I started selling. They go, hey, you want to sell drugs for us? And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I just started selling gobs and gobs of coke. And the great part about that was that I sold so much that I didn't have to pay for me using. Now, I can't tell you how much I used because there was an endless supply all the time. So I just kept using it, using. And I didn't do acid anymore. I drank beer and had cocktails and coke every weekend for years. Then one day we got into a riff, me and these two people, and what had happened is they had gone away, and I just dealt to small time dealing. They had the big quantities, and then they'd give it to me, and then I'd package it up and just sell small quantities. And they went out of town, and they said, okay, we're going to put you in charge. And I was like, oh, okay. And because I was making them so much money. I had given all their money to their dealer because I didn't want to be responsible for it. Well, she was high on coke and said that I never gave her the money. And, you know, how do you prove something like that? So there was a big riff about it, and they said, okay, you need to pay us back. And I said, no. I go, I don't think that's fair. I said, what's fair in my mind is that I pay half of it back. So I said, I'm not going to sell for you anymore because they wanted me to keep selling to make their money back. And I said, no, it's just not, I don't want to do that. So I had known this friend from the monastery. She was always tweaking, and I never sold her coke, but I didn't know what she was doing. Well, it turns out she was doing crystal meth. And she knew that a lot of people knew me, so she asked me one day, she goes, you know, do you want to sell crystal for me? And I go, well, I don't know what that is. And she goes, well, here, try it. And I think for the first time, and what I would say today is that was my drug of choice. Because I always got the mores so bad doing cocaine and couldn't sleep and, you know, trying to do downers so I can get up and go to work on Monday. And there was this constant yo-yo effect going on with me, up, down, up, down. And after I did the first few lines of crystal, I was like, wow, okay. I never got the mores on it. I mean, for me, when you're doing crystal, when you're up, you're up. And when it's time towards the end of my journey of crystal, I will admit that I had to do downers to kind of slow myself down. But through all this whole thing, I kept working. I was kind of a responsible drug dealing addict. I kept my job, always went to it. I remember sometimes I had a new girlfriend now. I was in my mid-20s, and she would have to help me. She goes, you got to go to work. Remember, that was the deal that you made. And I go, okay. I would be so weak from not eating and being up for, you know, first you're up for one day, and then you're up for 2, 3, 4. Uh-oh, now it's 5 days. But I couldn't get myself in the shower. And it's kind of pathetic now that I look back on it. But she would have to help me get naked, get into the shower, help me wash, dry me off, help me get dressed, put me in my truck so I could go to work. That's crazy. That's just crazy. But you know what? I did it for many years until 1989. So
12 years.
Yeah, must have been. The monastery was a fucked up party. That's what it was. There were a lot of minors. Street kids, kids that I met that were, their parents had kicked them out, and so they were turning tricks, whether that be on the street, but then they'd come to the monastery. If they looked too young, the owner wouldn't let them in. There was a lot of sexual abuse going on. They had rooms there that you could have sex in. And it just had a curtain that you would pull across, and definitely minors. I have a soft spot for minors, and I think because of how I grew up and all that. But I always kind of tried to look out for them. Sometimes they'd want money, and I'd buy them something to eat. Sometimes they asked me for money so they could get a hotel room, rather than, they used to find abandoned houses, and a whole bunch of them would get together and sleep in the abandoned houses. There was a period of time at the monastery where somebody thought that they were going to try to rip me off of my drugs, crystal, and they came up to me and they said, "Are you so-and-so? Can I buy some drugs from you?" And I never sold to anybody that I didn't know. And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And they go, "You do too." And they hauled off and punched me in the eye. And I didn't realize how many people, they go, "Oh, she just got punched. Come on, get him." And this group of people, just probably because, I guess they liked me because I had drugs and they were my friends. They went after the guy and beat the holy bejesus out of him because he had punched me. Which, in the big scheme of things, if we talk about my family stuff, that was a big deal to me, to have somebody stick up for me and care about me, and the family aspect. Be it right or be it wrong, when that's what we're seeking our whole lives, is to feel worthy of love, not feel abandoned. It was almost like, it was one of the very first few times that, wow, I'm not abandoned, because before I would have thought if somebody would have hit me, that I'd be standing there by myself and they would have beat the shit out of me, but that wasn't the case here. And so at some level, even though I was really fucked up on drugs, that really meant a lot to me on the inside. The other thing that used to go on there is they had white parties and red parties. The white party was always on an anniversary, and the red party was like Valentine's Day or Christmas or something like that. So you were supposed to either dress all in white or dress all in red, and they didn't make colored Levi's back then, so we found white Levi's, and we'd take them to my house and put food coloring in the washing machine, and they always turned out kind of salmon pink. We could never get them really red, but we thought, well, we're close enough. But the problem with that, when those big parties happened, because anybody could get in, and you have to, as the years passed with the monastery, they would start letting in pretty much anybody. But they had this big colander, I'll call it, like, a witch's colander, and people that sold drugs or whoever, everybody would go in and just start dumping stuff in there, and people OD'd, and we'd go, "Hey, they're ODing right now. Somebody go get the owner." And so he'd come down, and what he would do is have some young kids that drove, scoop them up, put them in their car, take them up to Harborview, and just drop them off, because they didn't want, he didn't want bring any attention to what was happening. So that was pretty weird. Well, one day, because I was managing one of the lesbian bars, when I closed the bar at 2, I would go to the monastery afterwards for after hours party, sell more drugs. And at that time, if you were still over 21, you could come in. Well, one thing you need to know back in that time frame is that it was still taboo to be queer, and when I was managing the bar, there were a lot of lesbians that were on the police force. But we had made a deal kind of with them that if we saw anybody come in, a cop come in to ID, because that's how they hassled our bars, was to start IDing people. We would let them know so they could scurry out the back door and not get caught. Well, one day one night I should say, we were just all partying and all that, and all of a sudden, the lights came on. I mean, you have to remember, they're blaring dance music, and all of a sudden, music stops, lights come on, and everybody says, "Don't move!" And all these, just like on TV, they took their badges out from underneath them, and I was stunned because I had gobs of drugs on me, and I'm looking around, and I see a lot of the lesbians who I would have warned, if this would have happened at the lesbian bar. They never said anything to any of us, or at least to me. So that was devastating to me, just devastating how they could come in. Well, one of the deals is that they were mugged. They said, "Okay, everybody stay put. You cannot leave this room." And there were so many different rooms, and they had cops everywhere undercover, that we had to stay in the room that we were in. And I just happened to be on the dance floor room, which was huge. And they said, "In order for you to leave, we're going to take your mug shot and we're going to frisk you." And I was like, uh-oh. And that stand your ground drug dealer in me was like, no, I am not fucking. And if you looked around, you'd see drugs flying everywhere. They were all over the floor and stuff. But I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't care. They are not coming in here and going to wreck me. So I decided that what I was going to do, when I calmed down about thinking about what I was going to do, I said, okay, so I know it's going to be a woman that searches me, and I know women that search women. It's not going to be as, feely especially because they know that we're lesbians, right? And chances are that it's going to be a straight girl searching me. And some women that I saw got searched would go, "Oh yeah, over to the left a little bit," kind of just being smart asses. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to stick this down my pants, and I'm either going to get out unscathed or I'm not. And I'm just going to take that chance. And I got the courage to go get my mug shot, get my search, and then I was allowed to leave, and I frickin' made it out, hallelujah, which felt good. And I just waited outside from my girlfriend at the time and my friends to go through the same process to get out. Now, if you were over 21, what we heard is that you were going to get charged, because now they knew who was over 21 and who was a minor, and that they were going to take us and charge us all for contributing alcohol to minors, which would have been a huge-ass deal. Well, something happened, because who they really wanted was the owner of the monastery, and he did some kind of plea deal, I remember. I'm not sure what it was. So I was very shocked, but anybody that was over 21 that got a mug shot, they didn't come after us once they had the owner of the building. After the big raid at the monastery, the majority of the over 21 quit going because they were like, wow, we don't want to put up with this. And the other thing I would like to say too is, back then in that time period, cops for the most part, nobody cared about it if you were gay or not. Nobody cared at all whatsoever. So they always kind of left us alone. So what ended up happening, because you could tell there wasn't that many people going there anymore, of course I was, because I'm a dealer, they started getting straight young people to start going there. And the big problem with that was the straight young people still live at home, and they have straight parents, and their parents care about them. Most of the queers, either most of us, none of us really, I'd say probably 99% of us didn't live at home. We were all just out there making it on our own. Whether you were a minor, doing tricks to get your money, or over 21, you had an apartment or something. So some of the straight people started ODing. And they would make it home, but they would be so fucked up, and their parents were like, where have you been? And started trying to follow them and to figure it out. Well, once there were this whole gaggle of mothers that were tired of their kids coming home fucked up, they started following them about where they were going. And so once the heterosexuals parents got involved in the whole thing, they were able to seek justice. They ended up closing the monastery down, which was just devastating. You know, I'd been going there since the day one it opened, and I felt like I got lost, kicked out of a family community that I had built. You know, be it right or be it wrong, that was still a family when you're seeking that in your whole life.
What was your family life like?
My family life, it's looking back on it, it's very fascinating to me about family life because I was born like 6 weeks early. I was only 4 pounds 8 ounces, and so I was kept in an incubator for a long time. And back then, you still couldn't have any touch. Well, to this day, I'm like, why in the hell did you want to come into this world so soon? You know, you could have waited 6 weeks. So, and I didn't. So I was born into an alcoholic father and a mother who was manic depressive. And my dad wasn't around a lot because he was always drinking, or he decided to work on the pipeline, and he would be up working on the pipeline and didn't come home for weeks on end. My mom never really could take care of us. She used to give us babysitters. I was sexually abused by female babysitters when I was very, very young. And my grandparents had wanted to sell this house. Well, they decided to sell this house in Ballard to my mom and dad. And even though they didn't get along, my dad used to beat my mom up. She tried to kill herself from the physical abuse that my dad was giving her when he'd come home drunk, and she tried to kill herself, and my dad found her, and they ended up committing her. And we were just toddlers. I was just a toddler. I do have an older brother. He's 2 years older than I am, but I don't remember a lot of that right then in that moment, but I do know that we went to daycare. I know my mom worked a lot. I'm not really sure where my dad was, if he was up in Alaska working on the pipeline. He was a chef. And my mom somehow got me and my brother, we took a bus. And I guess apparently I started taking a bus with my brother for a little while to go to nursery school, and it was pretty far away. I had to transfer, so I took 2 buses. I don't know why I went so far away, but at 2.5 years old, and I was always scared because I didn't know. I mean, you're only 2.5. My sister-in-law kind of woke me up one time and said to me, and when my nephew was 2.5, and she goes, "Look at your nephew right now." And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Could you put him on a bus by himself?" And I said, "No, fuck no." And she goes, "That's how old you were." And I don't have a concept because it was my life, so I never really thought anything one way or the other. So looking back on all that from childhood, just being scared all the time, I was, truth be told, I think when being so young and taking a bus by myself, trying to be responsible as you can at 2.5 years old, of taking a bus, transferring, sometimes forgetting to get off the bus. People are looking for me. The bus driver would find me in the back seat, in the back row. Just, you're little, so he can't really see when he gets to the end of the line, and he would walk if he was going to clean up the bus, see if there was any garbage on it, and then he'd see this little girl sitting there. And he goes, "Well, where do you belong?" So once the bus drivers actually, if they were the same one, got to know me, every time I would get on the bus, they would say, "Okay, sit up by me." Because what happens when you're that young, there were definitely older kids that should be taking. Of course, everybody looks big when you're 2.5, 3, 4, 5, right? Everybody looks big, but they used to pick on me. They would steal stuff from me. I remember my dad had come home one day from working on the pipeline up in Alaska, and he came home, and I was so proud because my dad had given me something. I mean, it just, even thinking about it kind of warms my heart. And these fucking kids, it was, you know what it was? It was a toy boat, and it was filled with candy. And they said, "What do you got there, little girl?" And I remember them stealing it from me. And they go, "What is this? This is stupid." And I go, "That's mine. Can you please give it back?" And they took it and they threw it on the floor. The candy went everywhere. And I sat in the chair, in the seat on the bus, and I just cried. You know, it's like, wow. And so then, you know, they'd push me, ah, ha, ha, and laugh. So I formulated in my mind, I don't have anybody to love me, protect me, any of that. Leaving me to fend for myself at such an early age kind of scarred me and set me up for definitely failure at the way beginning of my life through my seeking all the time, being worthy, worthy of love, not being abandoned. I mean, that's the way I felt my whole life until I got into therapy after I quit doing drugs and stuff in 1989. But even so, you know, you have a lot of inner stuff to work on. So I just never felt safe in the world. And, you know, sometimes people would, even the teachers at the preschool, Mrs. Perkins, I don't know, she's dead now, and she's been dead for years. However, she was mean. She was very snotty and mean. I remember that. And, well, at Perkins, since a lot of times I didn't have lunch, no food, that my mom didn't make us lunch, so I would get a little cup of hot soup. And one day we had tomato soup 2 days in a row. And I was kind of trying to just be, you know, a funny kid, you know, and I'd go, "Oh, not again," because it was tomato soup again. And Mrs. Perkins just laid right into me, and she said, and she made me feel like this big. And she just said, "What if I said that every time you walked in?" "Oh, no, not Annette again." And that's when I think I just went inside myself and tried to be small and not seen in the world at all. I didn't want anybody to see me, recognize me, pay any attention to me, and it just made me more and more fearful of the world and the people in it. At some point when my mom got out of the mental institution place, she decided that she was going to divorce my dad. Oh, well, before I tell you about that, so one day, it's dark outside, and my dad came home drunk from work. My mom was working, she wasn't there, and it was just me and my brother. And you know, my brother's only 2 years older than me, and he's trying to take care of me because I'm young, so much younger. You know, he's trying to cook us something, maybe a pot pie, or put soup on the stove or something like that. And you know, he can't take care of his little sister. He's only 2 years older. It's not like he was a teenager or something. So my dad came home drunk, and he said, "I want you kids to know that I love you, but I'm leaving, and I'm not going to come back." And I remember when he left the door open. It's dark outside, so here I am scared again, and we had this big chair, and I hid behind that chair. And I'm not recalling if it was my brother that called my grandparents in Yakima, or if my dad called, which is like a three and a half hour drive from Seattle to Yakima. And I didn't stand, I was crouched down behind this chair, scared because the door was open and it was dark. And three and a half hours later, my grandparents from Eastern Washington showed up to take us because they couldn't believe that my dad had just left us there. Now, where was my mom? I don't know, working. My mom just did what she did. I don't know what she did, but so at that point, what ended up happening is my mom just got us babysitters. They belittled my dad and said, when the judge asks you, which, you know, in the big scheme of things, you don't get to say who you want to live with when you're that young in elementary school. So they kept hounding us, saying, you can't say you want to live with your dad or you're going to end up in a foster home. And then they tell us how bad foster homes was. So again, there's a scare tactic, right? Oh no, I'm not going to be safe. So what ended up happening was, till my mom could get her shit together, I went and lived with my mom's parents, and my brother went and lived with my dad's parents. So he was in Eastern Washington, and I was still in Seattle. And we just stayed that way until my mom got her shit together. And then at some point, we went back to live with my mom, and then, of course, she found a wino. You know, my dad was an alcoholic. This guy's a wino, and got my mom pregnant, and they got married, had a baby. He was very, very mean to us before my sister was born, and he'd beat us with a belt. We'd be on restriction for the whole summer over nothing. I was always afraid. I was afraid of him. Still, the world was still very scary to me. Didn't feel protected. I got a cat one year. I think it was for my birthday, and she had 2 kittens, and I had a chocolate bar, and I didn't tell anybody I had a chocolate bar, so I hid it in this little, like a cigar box in my bedroom. Well, one of my kittens got it, and I was afraid and got really sick, and I went up to my bedroom, and the cat's sick, and so I ran downstairs with the cat, and I said, my cat's sick, we need to take it to the doctor, you know, and I didn't want to tell that it had eaten most of my candy bar because I didn't want to get beat by a belt, and that was tough. That was tough when you're a little girl, afraid to say probably what the truth is. But he was kind of off his rocker anyway. So he goes, well, no, he goes, we can't afford to take it to the vet. He said, we're going to shoot it. Sorry. So we put my cat in my kitten in a pillowcase, and we went outside, and he shot the cat, and then turned to me and my brother, and my brother was standing there with me, and he said, "Okay, you guys dig a hole and bury it." And I was sobbing so much I couldn't do it. I was kind of like, it was like I was petrified, frozen. And my brother took the shovel and started digging. He goes, "Here comes Phil." He said, "Go ahead." He goes, "Just get on your hands and knees and pretend you're digging." And I said, "Okay." So that was just so traumatic for me. And obviously, it still brings up heartbreak that I was so afraid that I couldn't say what happened. He probably wouldn't have took it to the vet anyway because he was wackadoodle. So after that, my mom got pregnant with my sister, and I was 9 when my mom had my sister, but to raise money, extra money, because my mom was a waitress her whole life and he didn't work, and so he got this bright idea that we were going to have paper routes, and that's how we were going to make our money. So even though we were in elementary school, he got 5 paper routes. Well, they weren't where we lived, so they would have to drive us to. We had 4 paper routes in Magnolia and one in Queen Anne to make the most money. They wouldn't give us more than 6. Well, me and my brother had to walk them sometimes. In 1968, there was a very, very big snowstorm. My mom couldn't get out anymore. I mean, she drove us there. If we got complaints from their papers not being delivered, he'd beat us with a belt for every complaint we got. In 1968, when the big snowstorm was, I remember they just dropped us off. Somebody dropped us off. It wasn't him or it wasn't my mom. Dropped us off at the paper shack, and we were trying to load the papers, and the guy goes, well, I'll come back and pick you up. But his car got stuck, so he never showed up. But what ended up happening is I was delivering these papers, and this person knew I was cold, and she gave me some hot chocolate. Well, I fell asleep on her living room floor for 2 or 3 hours, and when I woke up, she goes, "It's okay, little girl," and I go, "No, I gotta get to my brother. I gotta get to my brother." So I ended up going to the paper shack and found my brother, and he goes, "Where have you been?" I go, "I fell asleep on somebody's floor," and he goes, "Oh, I don't know if he said shit or fuck, but he said, oh, we're going to be in big trouble." And so I go, "Well, I got all these papers left to deliver." And he goes, "I don't care." He goes, "You're not going to. We're going to go home." And so I go, "Well, I'll get a belt whip in for every paper that we don't deliver." And he goes, "Yeah, but there's so much snow. Maybe people will be nice enough and not complain." And that's definitely what happened. And so after that, my sister was born in August of that year, and the day that my mom was going to have my sister, she drove us to Magnolia so we could start delivering papers and all that stuff, and very excited that we had, I had a little sister, very excited about that. She was 9 when I was born, and somehow we lost all the paper, because what was happening was when we went out, we had to go up, knock on doors to collect the money. Well, Phil would take the money. He never paid for the papers. He would take the money so we could go buy cigarettes and wine. So it was a mess, and they fired us. Have you ever heard of anybody getting fired from a paper route? But we did. And so he just stayed home and drank. My sister was born. I can remember times coming home from school, and my sister would be crying. She'd be wet. I'm only 9, and I thought, and he'd just go up and see why she keeps crying. And she'd be wet, so I'd change her diapers. And my grandma and great-grandma this had gone on for quite a while, and I didn't know anything about it because none of us really ate very well. Well, my sister was malnourished, and she could have died. And when my grandma and great-grandma on my mom's side saw her, they were like, "Oh my God, she's going to die," because she was just skin, and I couldn't take care of her. I didn't know what to do. Where do you get food for a baby? I don't know those things. So her dad's parents came from New Mexico and picked up my sister and took her. And then my brother went to Yakima, Eastern Washington. I stayed in Seattle, so we all got separated. So now we're all at separate grandparents' houses. When looking back from day one, or I'll say from at least when I was 2.5, always fending for yourself, always being abandoned. There wasn't anybody. You go live with your mom and dad, and then you go to your grandparents. You go live with your mom, you go live with your grandparents. It's always like you're always moving around. Who loves me? I mean, if your parents, how I felt was that if my parents can't even care for me and look after me, I'm not worthy of being loved. I didn't realize at the time how much my grandparents did love me, because we did end up going to court, and they took custody away from my mom, one of their arguments was my mom had tried to get my sister back, and I didn't think that was right because I just knew my sister had been in a stable home since she was 6 months old, and she was like 2.5 or 3, and my mom tried to get custody. And one of the things my grandparents said to the judge, they go, she can't even, how come she didn't get my sister back was, they went down there and said to the judge, she can't even take care of her 2 older kids. Why? How can she take care of this little one? And you know, I was always grateful for that because they were right. You know, don't fuck up her life like you did us. That's just not right. So we got a ward of the court, and what the court said gave us to all of our prospective grandparents to raise us. And because I was in Seattle, my grandma was always scared that something was going to happen to me. So she would only let me play outside for an hour a day. I had one friend who lived across the street, and that's the only place that I could go and play. Well, one night in the middle of the night, my sister's dad got in contact with my mom and got on a bender and talked my mom, or I don't know if he talked to her, but she was, you know, she was afraid of men because she was always getting hit by him and stuff. Said, we're going to go get a net. So I don't know, I know I was asleep when it happened. It's probably after the bars closed, I reckon. That's a joke. Anyway, I don't know what time it was. They came over to my grandma and grandpa's, and they knocked on the door, and they said, we want to take a net right now. Pack up her clothes. And they were like, what? And so I'm upset, and I go, Grandma, what's happening? I don't want to leave here. Because you know why? Now that I look back on it, I didn't want to leave there. I was fed, even though, yes, I had a lot of restrictions about playing an hour outside. I had a roof over my head. I had somebody that tucked me in at night, and I had food. That was a good life for me. And so I went to my mom's, and they go, well, don't forget, here's her school clothes and here's her lunchbox. I remember going to my mom, and then the next day at school, I'm either in 4th or 5th grade, I can't remember which one. They called me down to the office, and I thought, oh my God, I must be in trouble because my mom stole me. I mean, I didn't know what the hell was going on. And I get down there, and my grandma was sitting there. And she goes, I just want to make sure you're okay. And I said, okay. And I started crying. And I said, I just want to come back to your house. Because I knew what it was like living with my mom and her husband at that time. I knew what it was like. And they go, well, you can't do that right now. So my dad's side and my mom's side, they got together and tried to work together so that my mom couldn't come and steal us anymore. And so what ended up happening was I went back to the classroom, and you could tell I was crying and I was still sniffling. And the teacher, when I walked in, I mean, she didn't know what was going on in my life, and she looked at me and she goes, why are you crying? Why are you being a baby? And she started belittling me in front of all the kids. And so everybody's, you know, staring at. And, you know, like I said earlier, I didn't want attention, but I was trying to keep it together. And she goes, why are you crying? Stop crying right now. And she just kept yelling at me, which didn't help the tears dry up, you know. And so it was like, even I had adults in my life that just weren't loving, kind. And that's just not right when you're growing up and trying to find your way in a world that you're so scared of and you don't know what to do. So we ended up going to court. I remember that the judge talked to me and my brother for a good hour, I swear to God. I can't tell you one word he said because I think I was stuck, and he said that he wasn't going to let us go back with our mom, that we were each going to our prospective grandparents, and that he thought that that would be the best situation. And it was a little confusing for being a kid on that, though I also knew that at my grandparents, they were loving, and like I said, that I did have a place to sleep, clothes, food. I did a lot of things with my grandpa. I used to go to work with him, and I just loved everything. He'd take me with him wherever he went, and I just loved that. So we did that, and the just before 8th grade, my mom met a new guy. Oh, brother. And he was a recovering heroin addict. And he had a kid, didn't live with him. His kid didn't live with him. His kid lived with his mom, who is a lesbian. That was the first lesbian that I had met. And I was like, oh, there's a lesbian. Her and her girlfriend. But they went to court and got the judge to say, can we just try the kids? They're older now. Can they just live with their mom for the summer? And the judge said, yes, just for the summer. So behind the scenes, apparently, my mom and her husband at that time were working behind the scenes to make it permanent. And so it happened. It was permanent. And then we ended up in high school. My mom was married to him. It didn't last very long. Imagine that. My mom couldn't afford to stay in the house anymore that we were at, so she got a duplex. Now, by this time, my brother's already moved out of the house because he's 18, and we went and moved into a duplex. Well, my mom had a meltdown. And during that meltdown, one day I come home from school and I didn't see her anymore. And I didn't know where she was. And I didn't have any food, but I just knew that my mom wasn't there, and I knew I should just get up and go to school. So I did do that. I got up and I walked to school every day. And finally, after a few days, I went to the counselor there and I said, I have a little situation. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, I don't know where my mom is. And I said, I'm really hungry. I don't have any food. I was wondering if maybe I could get the free lunch, the free breakfast and the free lunch at school so I can eat something. And he goes, yeah. He goes, we can do that for you. And he goes, it looks like you have holes in your shoes. And I said, yeah, I do. And he goes, well, we're going to give you a voucher. And we want you to go buy a new pair of shoes and a warm shirt or a sweatshirt or something. And then they gave me a voucher for a Safeway or whoever so I could buy some food. Well, shit, I still don't know what I'm supposed to buy at the store. So the only thing I could think of was, oh, I'll make a hamburger. So I bought hamburger, and that's kind of what I survived on. I was playing ice hockey at the time, and my coach didn't want me to quit. I told him I had to, and he said, no. He goes, we'll pay for everything. He goes, you're going to come to all the games, even if when we're in Canada, we'll do your room. So it's like, it was almost like God, over all this time, put people in my life to bless me and to help me through things that I had no idea that there was a God at that time.
When did God first come into your life?
Even though a year before I got clean off crystal meth, even though I had no really concept and I would have never called it God, the woman that I was with in the very first house that I bought, she had left. And so what I noticed that no matter how much crystal I was doing at the time, it wasn't helping. I emotionally couldn't handle it anymore. I was crying all the time. I was getting high by myself, didn't want to associate with anybody. It was very devastating because I was getting abandoned again, right, in my mind. And I had somebody came over to look or to check on me because they knew I'd been getting high by myself and I'd been up for a few days, and I let him in my house. And I remember sitting on the couch and I just looked over at this person and I said, you know what? and I just started sobbing, doing the ugly cry, and I just said, all I've ever wanted to be in my life is happy. And I felt abandoned again. I didn't feel worthy of love, all those things. And happiness, being happy means so many different things for different people. Everybody has their own definition. And my happy was having family around and being with family, even if it was a chosen family. And so I just had a big meltdown. And I don't remember what she said to me, my friend that was there, but said something to me. And I decided that since I couldn't handle crystal meth anymore because I was always getting so emotional about it and crying a lot, I decided to quit doing it, to quit doing crystal meth on my own. However, that day when I sat on that couch crying, being an emotional wreck every time that I did crystal, when I said all I ever wanted to do was be happy, I believe in that moment God took the obsession of crystal meth out of my life, lifted me up, and I didn't know it at the time. So shortly after once I had come down from that last bender, when I said that, I decided I was going to white knuckle after 10-ish years on crystal, that I wasn't going to do it anymore because it was wrecking me. Now, I did do a beer because I love my beer and cocktails, but I didn't do cocaine, I didn't do crystal meth, I didn't do any of that. So then what ended up happening was, as soon as I was getting around to saying, oh my God, I haven't done crystal for a whole year, it kind of lit me up inside, and I was kind of happy about that. But then there was this nagging little thing in the back of my head, and I got scared that once I said that I'd made it a year, that I would go back out and use. So I actually put myself in a 9-month outpatient treatment program. And they had strict rules that I didn't think I wanted to follow, because one of them was you couldn't do alcohol if you wanted to come into their program. And I said, well, that's stupid. I don't have trouble with alcohol. It's the crystal, it's the cocaine. And then I said, I'm going to go to a hockey game this weekend. I got to drink a beer at a hockey game. Are you nuts? And so I ended up going to the hockey. They go, well, come back and see us on Tuesday, which would have been a couple days after the hockey game. So I went to the hockey game, and I didn't drink. And then I went there, and I said, okay, I did it your way. I didn't drink. Can I come into your program? I don't want to use crystal anymore. So even though I had things, I went there, you went there once a week. I put myself in there so I didn't have to go by strict mandates of people that were there from the courts. So I just kept working. I went to meetings, met a lot of people. The interesting thing was that I went to gay AA, which I was shocked that when I walked in the doors of an AA meeting, who was there? The people that I used to sell to. And everybody recognized me, and I was like, oh my God, and I couldn't believe how many people I knew. So most of them came up and hugged me and said, we're glad you're here, but I was again in the corner by myself, didn't speak, because I was like, I don't want these guys to know who I am. And I go, why are you guys here? And I did make some friends out of there. But so I just kept on with that process. And then all of a sudden I found a church, a bona fide church, not a monastery church. And I dove into that, and I don't know if I really believed it, but I said, wow, look at how these people are. So I started volunteering, doing a lot of work with the church and all that. Took tons of classes. I didn't really believe it because I didn't understand it, but I just kept act as if. So I just kept saying what they said, didn't know what it meant, but I just kept on and on and on and on and on. So a few years after that, I'm still not wanting to get high. My phone had quit ringing once you decide not to do drugs anymore, and definitely once you quit selling drugs, your phone doesn't ring, and you don't really have people that your friends anymore, the so-called druggy friends anyway. I never had anybody. So I just went to church and did volunteer work. What ended up happening in 1990 was I wanted to get a new car, and so I went to this car lot and I bought a 1990 red Jeep Comanche Eliminator, and I was like, wow. So that's one of my ex-girlfriends who, I thought maybe I could work things out with her if I got sober. That's another story. However, I called her up on the phone and I said, hey, I just bought a new truck. Can I come over and pick you up and take you to dinner? And she goes, yeah, okay. So I went over and picked her up. We went to this place for dinner. And when I got there when I parked my new truck, I was like, wow, I wonder if I should move because that guy's parked a little weird. And I get out, and it was this old Jeep that you don't see around anymore. It had a white blue seat, a broken tail light, all this stuff, because I really looked at it. And anyway, we went in and had dinner and came back out, and the whole side of my brand new truck that I had just gotten was dented all the way down the side. And I was like, oh my God, that guy next to me hit me. And my friend that I was with said, you don't know that. And I go, yes, I do know that. That car, that Jeep that was next to me hit me. And so I was devastated. I was mad. I took her home. I started crying when I got home and said, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. So I get home and I said, God, I don't know how much more I can take. I'm trying to stay sober. I'm trying to stay clean. I need my whole house plumbed. And now somebody just dented my truck that I can't afford to fix. Can you have whoever hit me find me and make good on this? So I just went to bed and let it go. Within a week, so I had been wiring a hotel in Bellevue, and within a week of asking God, so that night I went home, said the same thing, said, I need some help, God. I need somebody to come and help me. I need whoever hit me to make good on that and pay for this to get fixed. So again, I went to work. Well, I'd been on this job site for probably 2.5 years. Lo and behold, I show up early, show my boss, I showed him what happened to my truck, and he's like, oh my God. I pull in, I'm sitting in there having a cup of coffee. Who drives in? That same Jeep that was parked next to me at the restaurant a few days ago. Never been on the job site before. Turned out he was going to do the tile work at this building that we were building. So I said, oh my God, that's him. That's the car right there. Well, he wasn't in his car. He was in the job shack for the general contractor. So I go, he goes, you don't know that's it. And I go, yes, I do. I'm going to tell you everything about it. The white and blue seat, the tail light missing. So I went out there and my heart's pumping. Sure as shit. I walk around it. And he goes, I don't see anything. And I said, no. I go, okay, let's just walk around it slower. And lo and behold, by that time we walked around it and I go, look right there. You see my red Jeep? And you see that color matches what's on mine? And he goes, yes. So this guy comes out and he goes, I go, hey, is this your car right here, this Jeep? And he goes, yeah. He goes, they're very rare. You can't see very many of them. And I go, yeah, I know. And I couldn't hold it in, and I got livid and mad. And I said, you were parked next to me at the restaurant at blah, 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 and you hit me. And he goes, no, wait a minute. And I go, oh, no, you can't deny it. And I am so upset. I'm yelling at him, cussing at him. And I said, I'll prove it to you. And so I showed him and brought my truck closer. And I said, see, this is perfect bumper. There's the color of your car. And I said, look, I turned it into my insurance. They're going to pay for it as a hit and run. I said, all I want you to do is pay my deductible, and we'll call it a wash. And the other thing that was going on that was big in my life at that time was that I had my own house, but it needed to be replumbed. I was having leaks, and I didn't know a plumber, and I couldn't afford to get my whole house replumbed. And so in one of my AA meetings, I met a plumber. And I was talking to her after a meeting one time, and she said, I go, I don't know how much I could pay you, but if you could come and look. And she goes, you know what? She goes, I'll just replumb your whole house for nothing. And I'm like, really? Right then, 3 things: plumbing my house for free, praying for the person that hit my truck to come and find me and make good on it. I've been on the job site for 2.5 years. He had never been there before, and make good on it. And there was no way in heck that you can not know that God's hand is in that. And that's what led me on the path to start building my faith and believing that there's good out there that wants to find me if I can have faith enough to make it happen.
What does your religious journey look like?
Okay, so my spiritual journey had been long. I kind of had to act as if I do have a learning disability, and so what ends up happening is that it's very hard for me to learn about things, and sometimes the way they teach you. And so taking all these classes, I ended up going to the School of Ministry and diving into that. It was a master's program. I barely had graduated high school, and yet God put people into my life, and also to prove to me that I wasn't stupid, because that's what I thought I was, because I couldn't read very well or write or anything and spell. Put people into my life to help me get through writing papers. And I ended up going to a learning school to be tested to see what was going on with me. So, in my late 40s, early 50s, that's when I found out I had a learning disability and that I wasn't stupid at all. And so I just kept on. When I got into ministerial school, I had a mentor, and during that process, because you need to have one, they say, because a lot of stuff comes up personally, and that's when I started working on abandonment, not being worthy of love. It helped me see one of the things that I used to do personally to cover up the fact that I didn't feel worthy of being loved. My outlet was I shopped. So I would spend money, buy things. I was in debt up to my ass just from buying things, because what I thought in my mind was that if I go buy something and I have something that's new on me, then it'll be like, wow, look at me. I'm worth something. I have a brand new t-shirt. I have brand new shoes. So that's what I did so I didn't have to deal with my abandonment and not feeling worthy of love. So what ended up happening was, when you're in the School of Ministry, you start chipping away and unpeeling the layers and working on stuff that isn't true, so that you can just sit there and be there, for others, knowing the truth and building your faith through that process, so that you know that you're loved. So ministerial school's 5 years, and during that 5 years, what I was able to do was go back and look at all these situations in my life that helped build my faith to where I am today. But thinking about it, at 2.5 years old, God was with me. It might not have seemed like it. Yes, I was afraid of the world, but you know what? Nothing bad ever happened to me. Nothing. Yes, I had to fend for myself, but God was with me. And it's just heartwarming. I didn't end up in the foster care. Why? Because my grandparents stepped in to take care of me. So they loved me enough, but I didn't understand any of that. So I just kept working on stuff. Now I think that my biggest thing is that for me was the financial thing. It was very hard for me not to spend money. And I ended up getting scammed $500,000. And what I did was I took out full equity out of the house I was living in. It was worth $500,000. And I took out full equity, and so that it was like a pyramid scheme. And what they did for me, which they didn't do for most other people, was they paid my mortgage payment, which was like $5,000 a month at that time, plus they gave me money to spend, so I could say, well, look, this is how much money I'm getting. You know what I'm saying? So but it was a scam. The whole thing was a scam. Everything came crashing down on them. One day, when my money was supposed to show up, it didn't show up. And so I kept calling, and it took them a while to answer the phone, and they go, well, we're not going to pay you anymore. And I go, well, what do you mean? Now I'm in debt. I can't afford to pay $5,000 a month. So I started working all these side jobs and trying to make ends meet. And I had a good friend who I was in the school of ministry with, and she knew that I was stressing out, and I told her what happened, that I had gotten scammed. And she looked at me and she said, Annette, you don't have to live like that. And I just cried and sobbed the ugly cry. And she goes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you cry. And I go, no, that's exactly what I needed to hear. So I went home that night, went into my basement, got on my knees, and I prayed, and I said, okay, God, I don't know how to do this. Take it all. Take everything I have. I don't know how to do this. I keep thinking I do, but I fuck it up, so take it all. And that's fucking what happened. I lost everything. My house, I thought it was forsaken because of my lifestyle and what happened, but I wasn't. And the old saying of be careful what you pray for because you might get it, that's exactly what happened. But you know what? I couldn't do it anymore. So I was just going to let it foreclose, and what I did was I just I paid all my creditors, working with the financial or real estate person to sell the house. Somebody put an offer in on it, and we had to go to the bank to see if they would take it, and the bank said no. She owes us, I owed them $500,000. Well, not quite, because I had been paying on it. However, they said, we'll take this much money, but we need $10,000 more, and she needs to be out of the house within 30 days. And so I told my real estate person, you go, you tell them we need $10,000 more, and I'll be out in 30 days. And sure as shit, I didn't know where I was going. So I started driving around trying to find an apartment, and I go, okay, tell the bank, they'll get their $10,000, I'll be out in 30 days, but I want a letter stating that because even though these guys were paying what they were paying for it, that there was still $250,000. I said, I want a letter in writing saying that my debt has been forgiven of the $250,000, that I owe nothing, because I didn't want that tarnished on my record for whatever reason. I don't know why I thought of that, so obviously it was God speaking through me, what I believe now. And sure as shit, I got out, I got an apartment, and I got a letter stating that the $250,000 debt was forgiven. Who was that? That was God working in my life. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So I left there, moved into an apartment, continued to be an electrician. A friend of mine who I'd worked with on and off over quite a few years called me up and said, hey, why don't you apply to get a job as an electrical inspector for the city of Seattle? And I said, no, because I'll have to take a test, and I'm not good in the school stuff. And he goes, oh, just do it. So I applied, I did it, I'm in there. When you take your master electricians, you get 4 hours. There's only like 80 questions, but there's 3 parts to it. Well, what they did was they gave you 100 questions, but they only gave you 2 hours to do the test, which is a lot to look up code. And I looked at the clock. I didn't have very much time left, and I still had 3 or 4 pages left to do. And I just wanted to finish the test. I just wanted to finish it. So I put my pen and paper down. I folded my hands, and I closed my eyes for a minute and bowed my head a little bit, and I said, okay, God. I'm going to read the question silently to myself, and I want you to tell me what answers to write. So I picked up my pen and paper, read each question for those 3-4 pages that I had left to do, and I just started circling. There were multiple choice, and I just started circling. About 2 minutes before time was up, he put down they said I was done. I got up, I handed him my test, and I went to my car and I prayed and I said, thank you, God. All I wanted to do was finished. And that was my goal. Well, believe it or not, people, they called me and they said I passed the fucking test. And I was like, what? They go, do you want an interview? And I go, excuse me? They go, you passed the test. I go, I did? And they go, yeah. And I go, okay, might as well keep the journey going. I want an interview. I mean, how can you deny? So it's like all the things you ask, and it helps build the faith inside to give you that consciousness so that you can like, oh my God, I'm not here on my own. Not at 2.5, not at 9, trying to feed my sister, not at 14, not at 15, not being out on my own, everything. Getting punched, selling drugs. I have never been forsaken. And the more, I'm sorry, I'm just so filled with so much joy and gratitude right now. And every little bit, you just faith. And if you don't believe what you're saying, you just keep saying it. Because the Holy Spirit that indwells you will rise up from within you. You invite Christ in, and your life is going to come together quickly, quicker than you can imagine. And now I worked for the city for 12 years. It doesn't matter how long things take. When I said in the late 80s that all I wanted to do was be happy, which for me meant being with family. Once my dad died, I came down to Las Vegas to see my niece and nephew, and I missed them. My heart was joy. I knew them when they were little, and we had a relationship, and things turned the way they did. But the second time I came down here after my dad died, I looked at them and I said, you know what? I said, I think I need to retire and move down here and be with you guys. And they said, yes, we would love that. And I said, okay. Well, it took me 2 years to get here because when you decide to retire, you have to get your ducks in a row. And God helped me through the financial part to get to retirement. My nephew's a real estate person, and he helped me find a house. And the other thing was I told God kind of what I wanted, and I live in one of the Sun City communities. And my nephew had sent me maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 links for me to look, because I'm still in Seattle, to look at these houses. And I saw this one. And kind of like, when you know. Because my faith is stronger, and I knew what I want, I made a covenant with God and wrote down what I wanted to experience, not detail, to be with family. I wanted to pay cash for the house. All this stuff in my covenant, and then I signed it, and I prayed it every day. And my nephew sent me a link to a house, and I go, I need to see that one. I think it's my house. So we did a video thing, and he goes, do you want to come down here and physically be in the house and see it? And I said, oh no, this is my house. Because inside, what it sparked in me was that love of the Holy Spirit. It sparked in me joy and to be with my family. And I kind of wanted to appease my nephew. He goes, well, don't you want to look at the other 3? And I go, okay, but I'm telling you, this is the one. But I will look at the other ones because you did the footwork to find them. And so I walk through and I go, nope, this isn't it. He goes, well, what do you think? And I go, no, it's the other one. No, it's the other one. So we had to do that 3 times. But that was okay. And everything just kind of fell together. Now, even though I didn't retire until April, the house closes in February. And once again, I was able to, get it ready. You paint it, you kind of make it your own. They helped me do all that. And there's no denying that I am, at 67 years old, retired electrician, lesbian, Christian, faith-strong warrior, am living my best life ever with my family. Glory to God.
Where's a good place to start for people that want to begin to help themselves?
If you find it within you, like my down low was my bottom was an emotional bottom. And I do believe that God took the obsession of crystal off of me the moment I said all I ever wanted to do was be happy. But it's going to be different for each people, each person. And if you know that the life that you're living isn't fulfilling anymore because you know that you're in the addict running rampant, to the best of your ability, know that Christ is within you, that the Holy Spirit that indwells you, invite it. Say, I need help. Help me. Let it rise up from within you and show you the way. Show you what you're supposed to be. What path do you need to be on? Whether that's just going to treatment or whether that's finding a safe place to stay. It's all scary to get off drugs and to be on your own because all the people that you've surrounded yourself with that are doing drugs, you kind of have to let go of those. But you know what? God's there to fulfill every inch of your body, every inch of your mind.
What would be one piece of advice you would give to somebody that's going through what you went through as a kid?
When you're a kid, you don't know that there's a bigger way. You don't know that there's good working in your life and you can't see it. But there is. I'm so grateful, even though I was so lost, I'm so grateful that God helped me. Don't give up. To the best of your ability, know that you're loved. Even if it doesn't feel like it, if it doesn't look like it, you are loved because there is that within you that knows the truth of who you are.
And then, what message do you want to leave with?
I love you. You're loved. God loves you. You're not forsaken, and the Holy Spirit will show you the way.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you.